Proclamation. Whereas Dr. Adrian Bonser has been a member of the Dunwoody community for over 20 years, including serving as a board member of Dunwoody Yes. And whereas Dr. Adrian Bonser was a candidate for City Council District 2, Post 2, and was elected to office as one of the first councilors of the City of Dunwoody. And whereas during her tenure as council member, Dr. Adrian Bonser served as part of the selection and negotiation committee for the original government services contracts. Through her work with this committee, Dr. Adrian Bonser assisted the city in ensuring the provision of a high level of service while saving millions of taxpayer dollars. And whereas Dr. Adrian Bonser had served on the new Dunwoody Elementary School Committee and assisted with naming the school as well as determining their mascot and school colors, Dr. Adrian Bonser also serves as an original board member of the Town and Gown Committee, which works with Georgia Perimeter College to foster positive city-school relationships and work collaboratively to solve challenges. And whereas throughout her time on the City Council, Dr. Adrian Bonser has devoted many hours of her time attending homeowners association meetings in neighborhoods across the city and meeting personally with constituents in her district. And whereas Dr. Adrian Bonser's decision not to seek re-election, Dr. Adrian Bonser's decision not to seek re-election, the city wishes Dr. Adrian Bonser well as she enjoys the next chapter of her life with her family. Now, therefore, I, Michael G. Davis, Mayor of the City of Dunwoody, do hereby recognize and commend Dr. Adrian Bonser for her service to the City of Dunwoody and her contributions to the community. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Dunwoody, Georgia, to be affixed this 9th day of December, 2013.
I'll wait and make my public comments, but I feel honored with this. It's Women's Leadership Day here in Dunwoody. I feel honored to be honored at the same time as Eva Galambos. Thank you.
Personally, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. You all funded the study that I'm going to give you a quick summary of today. The study is available on the city's website and on a number of other places as well. I want to start by recognizing Kelly McCutcheon, who was one of the authors of the study and who is with us this evening, and I appreciate his being here. I guess I'm driving.
Yeah.
All right. So the feasibility study that we worked with you all to commission looked at only one scenario, and that was Dunwoody creating an independent school system by itself. The legislation that Tom Taylor has presented offers the opportunity for a number of different scenarios, of which a standalone system is only one. But that was the only thing that we looked at in this study. The question that we asked Kelly McCutcheon and his co-author, Christine Rice, who's a professor of economics at Georgia Tech, to answer was, can a Dunwoody Independent School District potentially manage a single cluster of Dunwoody schools, which is a high school, a feeder middle school, and the elementary schools that feed into it, and deliver the same or better educational and management services at a lower cost? And they used 2012 data to do their study. And what I'm going to give you now is in a very few slides, because I know you have a long agenda, the overview of what the results of that study were. First, just to set the groundwork, the DeKalb Schools has just about 97,000 students in 2012, 136 schools. They have an annual budget of $863 million. They've also had 5 superintendents in 9 years, at least a decade or more of dysfunction, mismanagement, waste, and now we can say racketeering,
Right.
which we always suspected, but now we have proof. They were put on academic probation in 2012, and as we all know, the governor dismissed all but 3 of the board members earlier in 2013. And that's really the backdrop for us beginning this effort. Let me also just say that all of us are incredibly fanatically dedicated to the idea of public education. And so what we are doing here is trying to make vast improvements in the public education of our students. City of Dunwoody, the cluster that we have today has 6,000 students. We account for about 6% of the DeKalb County population. We have 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 5 elementary schools. Outside of the city of Dunwoody is the School of Hightower. The residents of Hightower, the attendance zone for Hightower overlaps our city district. So in the event of an independent school district, Hightower would remain part of DeKalb County. But 200 of the students who go to Hightower today would come into a City of Dunwoody schools. And several hundred students who went to Hightower and then went to the middle school and the high school from outside the City of Dunwoody would revert back out. So there'd be some shifting, but relatively minor. One of the things that Dunwoody has going for it is that our high school cluster and feeder school system and our city boundaries line up incredibly well. And that will not be the case in pretty much any other jurisdiction that we go to. To further describe the movements of students, there are, in addition to Hightower, there are students who live in the city of Dunwoody and who go to schools outside of Dunwoody. So for example, the DeKalb School of the Arts, Kittredge Magnet Program, Chambly Magnet, both Chambly Middle and Chambly High Magnet. There are other specialized schools in DeKalb. If we formed our own school system, those students would no longer have those programs available, and they would come back to Dunwoody. There are also students who live outside of Dunwoody and who travel into Dunwoody to attend school. They presumably would also revert back to their home schools or find alternatives. There is also the likelihood that some students who today are homeschooled or private school would choose to come into a Dunwoody school system should it break from DeKalb County. And the feasibility study estimated those students and included the costs of educating them in the proposal. By the way, I will obviously give you all a chance to ask questions when I wind down, and there are not very many slides, so if you have questions, I promise to give you a chance to ask. A quick look at the demographics today. DeKalb is 68% black, 11% white, 14% Hispanic, and 6% Asian. And in DeKalb today, approximately 18% of the students come from homes where English is not spoken at home. A City of Dunwoody school system would be 51% white, 17% black, 12% Asian, and 17% Hispanic. And approximately a little over a quarter of the students would come from homes where English is not spoken. And that's largely because of the comparatively large Hispanic and Asian population in Dunwoody compared to DeKalb as a whole. In terms of revenue, there are 3 basic sources of revenue for school systems: property tax revenue, state funding, and federal funding. Dunwoody today has 6.1% of the students. They contribute about 14.4% of the revenue. It's interesting that state and federal funds, which are largely designed, the formulas are largely designed to equalize spending on students between richer districts and poorer districts. So one of the things that we will see if we split from the county is that the county's percentage of state and federal funding will go up, and our share of state and federal funds will take a nosedive. We will be relying almost entirely on locally raised property taxes for our students. It's also worth noting, and I'm glad Kelly is here to hear this, one of the really difficult things this study had to do, and which Kelly was responsible for, was calculating the impact of all of these formulas, which are incredibly complex and esoteric. There are probably only a handful of people in the state who really fully understand how these formulas work, and Kelly McCutcheon is one of them. So we have great confidence that the statistics that he's gathered are going to be accurate. A Dunwoody school system would have at its access $78.7 million in revenue using the current formulas from the state and the feds and using the current millage rate that homeowners pay today in property taxes. The estimate is that a Dunwoody central office, which would have to be created, would cost about $10.3 million per year. And in order to spend on Dunwoody students what the county spends today, it would require $37.7 million. This was the other incredibly difficult thing in the study. DeKalb's financial records are designed to obscure the spending that occurs at each school. They do not want us to know where the money is going. The other part of the partnership, Dr. Rice, was responsible for ferreting this out, and she spent countless hours combing through DeKalb's records, the state's records, to accurately document what the county is spending today to educate our students. And this is the number that she's arrived at, and we have a great deal of confidence in that number. The end result is that the city would have a surplus of $30.7 million, which could be used to either increase service levels and or decrease taxes. The state of Georgia requires that school systems be run by independently elected boards of education. So the decisions on to what degree a increase in services would be undertaken or a decrease in taxes would be the purview of a newly elected City of Dunwoody Board of Education. If Dunwoody were to leave the DeKalb system, DeKalb would lose $77.3 million in revenue, and they would save approximately $50.5 million in costs not incurred in educating Dunwoody students and maintaining Dunwoody schools. Because of the changes in their profile, their federal and state funding would increase from 46%, local funding would decrease from 46% today to 43%. And the net impact to the county would be a net reduction of $26.8 million. This is equivalent to 3% of their operating budget, negative impact of 3% of their operating budget. And it would represent a loss of just under $300 per remaining student. And below there you can see the statistics of how that all works out. Dunwoody surplus is projected at $30.7 million. We did ask the authors to estimate several things. We asked them to estimate what potential savings could occur if some of the non-institutional services were contracted out instead of provided by school employees. These are things like school maintenance and food service and transportation. They estimated, using some industry standard benchmarks, that anywhere from $381,000 to $1.5 million per year could be saved by doing the kind of contracting out that the city of Dunwoody does today. They estimated startup costs at $5 million. It's also important to note that in 2011, the county did an exhaustive look at the facility needs for all of their buildings. and they rated them in terms of deferred maintenance, in terms of the need for technology upgrades, for other needs, and in order to bring the buildings up to the county's standard from 2 years ago, it would require an expenditure of $7.7 million each year for 5 years. We also asked them to estimate what it would cost if the Dunwoody school system wanted to increase teacher salaries by 10% across the board in order to try and attract the best and the brightest. And that would cost approximately $1.7 million today, given the current payroll. And we also asked them to estimate, should a Dunwoody school system want to reduce class sizes to 19 per, the ratio of 19 to 1, what the cost would be, and that cost would be $2.3 million in terms of teachers, but it would also require 23 more classrooms, and that might be problematic. Let me also point out that it isn't clear, the literature isn't clear that reducing class sizes equates to higher performing schools. So whether or not we would choose to reduce those class sizes would be something that would be the subject of public debate, and it would be a policy decision that would be made by a future school board. It is worth noting that the DeKalb County Tax Assessor's Office has all of the Dunwoody school properties on its rolls, and they're currently carrying those schools at a value of $21 million. The expectation is that Austin Elementary School will be rebuilt with SPLOST funds, currently required by law. There will be the question of whether or not future city of Dunwoody has to buy the properties from DeKalb, and if so, at what price. It is worth noting that when the city of Dunwoody was created, there was some legislative relief that provided for the turnover of county properties, largely based on the idea that the residents of Dunwoody had, through their taxes over the years, already paid for them. Such a relief is also possible for school properties. There's also, in the case of school properties, some case law where a city school system was formed out of a county school system, and where Georgia courts ruled that the city school system being created was entitled to turn over facilities at no cost, again on the same basis that the residents of that city had over time paid for those facilities. As mentioned earlier, there are facilities requirements for the facilities we would inherit, and those total $38 million. And it's also worth noting that the study did not attempt to estimate or account for portable physical assets that could conceivably be reallocated elsewhere in DeKalb, like buses and computers, but which also DeKalb might not have the need for if they are losing 6% of their students, in which case they might be interested in the feasibility study. But worth noting is the timeline that we might anticipate. The best case is that a constitutional amendment will be voted on by the legislature this year, that there would be a statewide vote to amend the Constitution to allow the creation of new school systems in 2014, that the legislature could approve enabling legislation in 15, that we could have an election later in 15 to create a school system, and that conceivably you could have a first day of school on August 2016. That is really aggressive, probably unrealistic. More likely is the case that's over the other side, which would indicate that even if everything goes smoothly, it's more likely to be August of 2018 before we would start our own school system. I've had several people who've asked me what would happen to the students who currently are enrolled who live in the city and are enrolled out, or who are live out and are currently enrolled in, whether or not those would be grandfathered in and they'd be allowed to graduate in 2018, and that would certainly be something we would have to work out with DeKalb, and it's unsure how those transitions would occur. That would be a transition negotiation. The last slide, I'm sure you're happy about that. I do want to point out that we will have a public meeting to review the summary of the feasibility study. It is this coming Sunday at 2 p.m. at St. Luke's Presbyterian Church. We encourage everybody to come. We will take questions from the audience at that time. It's also worth noting that a new organization is formed called Georgians for Local Area School Systems, GLASS, and they are an advocacy group who will be working to push forward the approval of a constitutional amendment. So while our group, Dunwoody Parents Concerned About Quality Education, is a nonprofit group who came together to investigate the possibility of a school system, their group is a group that wants to encourage you to vote yes. So with that, I'll take any questions that you've got. And I thank you for your attention.
It's hard to follow that. My husband asked me if I'm going to miss this. I'm like, no, it'll be good to have my life back. And then when I hear, I'll miss it. Of course, I'm going to miss a lot of it. I'm going to miss a lot of you. But I'm going to be around. I'm going to still stay involved. 6 years ago, when I agreed to become a member of the Dunwoody Yes Board, I never dreamed of running for office. I am not a politician at heart, nor will I ever claim to be a natural at it. But folks recognize my honesty and integrity, and they also recognize my grit and determination to right the wrongs of DeKalb County and to improve the way of life for all. My career as a politician began not with my experience on the board of Dunwoody Yes, but rather in my recognizing that I wanted to spend my life serving others. This notion began the summer between my 8th and 9th grade when I worked at a camp for handicapped people of all ages and all handicaps. I knew I wanted a career in the healthcare profession. I worked for 7 years full-time as an RN in the ICU-CCU, but my interest in dentistry and wanting to contribute to a patient's sense of well-being only grew. I went back to school and received my DDS, my Doctor of Dental Surgery degree, and subsequently received a certificate of residency from the Emory University College of Medicine for completing a residency in hospital dentistry. I started and maintained my own practice in Dunwoody for 10 years, during which time I met and married my husband, and we agreed it would be best to sell my practice so I could slow down and enjoy life with my new husband, my 2 stepsons, and hopefully start a family of our own. Since that time, I've worked at DeKalb County for DeKalb County Board of Health, as well as an independent contractor in private practice, both as a dentist and as a consultant. I've also enjoyed donating my time and expertise as a volunteer dentist. I spent several days, for example, after Hurricane Katrina, treating patients who'd been relocated to Atlanta. But there were very few dental emergencies, so I ended up spending most of my volunteer hours dispensing drugs from the pharmacy because they did not have a volunteer pharmacist available. When Dan Weber first announced he was having a meeting at GPC with folks who were interested in incorporating Dunwoody into our own city, my husband, Brian, and I were excited and signed up to become volunteers. I subsequently became a member of the Dunwoody Yes Board. I've spoken with many leaders in the community and learned many of them got their start in the community, in community service, because of an issue either they or their neighborhood experienced, and I was no different. When the state of Georgia Board of Regents decided to build a 4-story parking deck behind our house and our neighbor's house, I sprung into action. I fought with the state on numerous issues for both our neighborhood and one neighborhood over from us. There were stormwater issues and light and noise spillage issues. I always say I never got to take zoning 101. I went straight to zoning 4.0 in order to get the state to fix the damage their ill-conceived parking deck caused. Unfortunately, this parking deck is now seldom used, as students and faculty prefer the parking at the entrance to the GPC campus. As all of you know, we officially became a city just 5 years ago on December 1st, as Tom mentioned, 2008. I, along with Councilman Shortall had the honor of selecting our initial city vendors and writing contracts in order for the city to open its doors on December 1st. We, along with our consultant, Don Boykin, put together a city in 6 very short weeks. It was an amazing and rewarding process. This is an honor and memory. Now I'm gonna have trouble talking. This is an honor and memory I will cherish and carry through life always. Sorry. I didn't think I was gonna get emotional about that. Sorry, guys. I've had some of the most wonderful life experiences since becoming a council member. I've met some of the most amazing and wonderful people in our community. This is hard for me. I've made lifelong friends both inside the Dunwoody community and out. Many folks now know I experienced some serious health issues during my time in office. It was during that time I met some of the most generous and thoughtful folks in our community. Women from the Dunwoody Women's Club, who I'd never met, brought over meal after meal to our house. They brought meals to my husband when I was in the hospital for 45 days in 2009, just so he didn't have to worry about dinner, but could come visit me every day in the hospital. Once out of the hospital, meals were brought to our house by council members and friends and folks I'd never met. I received untold cards and flowers and rides to doctor's appointments. I was so sick, I was not able to keep track of everyone who helped me so much. Sorry. So I'd like to take this opportunity, sorry. I didn't think this was going to happen. But I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for your generosity and your heartfelt good wishes and prayers. Sorry. They meant the world to both me and my husband. In the future, I look forward to having time to focus on my husband, our home, and our family. Dwight David Eisenhower once said, "Politics ought to be the part-time profession of every citizen." I hope you all take that to heart, and I will. I promise to stay involved in the community, but I'm going to focus more on my passions in the community. My husband and I also look forward to traveling and spending more time together. Brian has many times taken a back seat to my heavy schedule of evening meetings. He carried a heavy load during the 3 years I was very sick, which enabled me to continue my work on the city council and then go home and crash in bed from exhaustion. To him, I owe, more thank yous than I could ever possibly say. And I don't mean to embarrass you, but thank you from the bottom of my heart. To those who worked on my campaign and who supported me for more than 5 years, the 5 years I've been in office, I thank you for all of your hard work, your generosity, and support. To all the citizens of Dunwoody, I thank you for the honor of serving you on the Dunwoody City Council for more than 5 years. It's been an honor, a privilege, and a blessing to serve you all. Thank you.
Talk really close to the microphone.
Really close?
There you go.
I feel like you're almost going to kiss it. Sorry.
I am not a resident of Dunwoody. I live in Sandy Springs. I currently do not have a dog, but my dog Palsy's plaque is hanging in Brook Run Dog Park. So the current location is very special to me. Besides my full-time job, I work part-time for a dog sitting service, and some of our clients are friends of Brook Run. And I drive from Sandy Springs, Powers Ferry Landing, Buckhead, Smyrna, Roswell, Vinings, to name a few, in order to bring them to the park so that they can play with their friends at the dog park. Now I could wax poetic about how special this particular park is, but that's all been said, and although it's an important component of why this park is so very special, I don't think I need to touch on that aspect again. I could talk to you about the compaction of soil, erosion, destruction of trees, But again, it's been touched on by more qualified people than myself. Instead, I want to touch on some things that no one else has mentioned. It's not that I don't hold special meaning for the current location, because I do. I also have my personal opinions about the soil compaction, etc., but I'm no expert, so again, leave those issues to the experts. Instead, what I wish to discuss is the proposed new location and the impact it will have on safety. Safety of the dogs, adults, and especially children. Those who bring their dogs to the dog park, for the most part, recognize and pay attention to their dog's body language in order to keep trouble away. But when the park is moved to a high-trafficked area near a children's park, the owners will encounter people who are not familiar with dog behavior and may not know how to approach even a friendly, well-behaved dog. There will be children rushing at the cute doggy, squeals of delight which can frighten a dog who is sound sensitive or simply not used to children, and there will be skateboarders rushing past the dog park fence. Now, those are just two items of concern. Even if signs are posted not to taunt the dogs, don't you really think a teenager, do you think they're really going to pay attention to a sign like that, especially if they have other teenagers around them? They will want to show off and do just the opposite. And this is going to cause all kinds of chaos. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Where the park is located now is ideally set in a remote location of the park. It's a destination of people and dogs. You place the park in a high-traffic area, and you're only asking for trouble. Imagine an escaped dog near a skate park or the children's playground, and two busy streets just mere feet away. As I said, although the dog park patrons are responsible and mindful, we can never predict 100% that someone who does not know about the double-gated system entering and exiting the dog park will open the gate on one side and at the same time, oh, I had a lot to say about time.
Let's keep this sound down. Next one up is Brenda Strickland. Again, name, address, in 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Brenda Strickland. My address is 4581 Village Drive. I love dogs, but I love the woods. And since the addition of the dog park, I've not been able to enjoy walking through the woods in Brook Run. Before the dog park came in, I could go back there and walk on the old broken down asphalt trails, and I could walk through the woods, and there was no black fence obstructing my experience of the woodlands. The virgin forest was available to me as a citizen of the city of Dunwoody, a taxpayer in the city of Dunwoody. That experience is no longer available to me. The wildlife that frequent those woods is no longer present in that part of the woods. Coincidentally, I happen to live right behind the dog park. The serenity of my home and my backyard are frequently disrupted by not only the barking dogs. I have a dog. I love dogs. I love watching the dogs play in an appropriately located dog park. The screams of frantic owners when dogs have gotten into tiffs with each other is a little disruptive when you're relaxing on the patio. So I would really like to recommend that you seriously consider, what's the purpose of woods in Dunwoody? Is it for our dogs to enjoy, or is it for our people to enjoy?
Thank you. Next name up is Maria Christensen. Again, name and address, and 3 minutes.
Well, I'm Maria Christensen. I was here in the last meeting, and I come again to say I'm also a taxpayer, and the woods are there for animals and for people. I don't have any children. I have 4 dogs that I rescued. I have a lot of friends at the dog park, and one of the reasons why I live in Dunwoody is because of the dog park. And I think the ideal location is where it is, just because I'm not going to be taking my dogs to the other dog park. I don't take them 4 at a time. I take 2 at a time. And the reason is 1 acre is not safe to have a whole bunch of dogs running. I'm not going to take So once you decide to move the dog park, for me, it's over. I'm not gonna have a dog park anymore. So that's all I have to say. Please consider us taxpayers too and listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next name up is Beverly Armento. Name and address in 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Dr. Bonser. Thank you very much. With your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask that you allow me to just have a little ambient noise. Thank you. I'm a past president of the Lakeview Oaks Homeowners Association, and I'm here tonight to talk about the dog park. We thank you for allowing our community to state our point of view. Just make sure this is on. I know you've taken time to read our position papers, so I'm not going to repeat the main points from our position papers, but I urge you tonight to act on principle. And that principle is that you've already made policy. You've already made a decision. And you've made those decisions based on knowledge and public input. In 2011, the council approved the park's master plan. The plan states that the city will protect as much of the urban forest in the park as possible. That same plan states that the number 4 priority for the Brook Run Park is the relocation of the dog park because of 3 major issues. Damage to the land, issues surrounding the water, and noise issues. The council has already voted to move the dog park. This is a decision that you made based on public input and based on knowledge. Now, is there damage to the dog park? Everyone, including those who propose that the dog park stay in the current location, agree that there's damage to the dog park. Look at the plan that they submitted to you. Look at the extensive amount of work that they themselves are proposing would be needed to restore this land. The council also approved the 2012 Arbor Guard study. The Arbor Guard study said that the dog park land was extremely compacted and the eroded soils caused, you probably maybe have gotten this message here, that the compacted and eroded soils caused the water to run off the soil surface, and thus
Thank you, Armento.
I'm sorry. Just want to say, this is what we hear every day.
Thank you. Next name up is Peggy Thompson. Name and address and 3 minutes. Ms. Thompson.
I'm Peggy Thompson. I'm a Dunwoody resident. I don't have a dog, but I do pay taxes. And I'm here to ask you to consider some facts before voting for the relocation of the Brook Run Dog Park, as most of you campaign as fiscally conservative. So I must ask, how can you even consider approving an item with a budgeted amount of $195,000, excuse my voice, $70,000 for the dog park, $125,000 for a restroom, as per your approval at the October 28, 2012 council meeting, when staff now recommends a budget of $304,424. That's right, as the $281,583 staff quotes conveniently did not include the $22,841 already paid to the design of this dog park to Forsyth. Even more disturbing for me is the fact that staff recommends you vote to let a bid for contractor for a plant that has not been approved for build construction. The plan is flawed. May I also suggest that you inquire as to how many dog parks Old Mountain has built. I'd also like to ask you to review the budget, excuse my voice, to find the line item for the plan's reference of required constant remediation and maintenance to prevent erosion, which includes rotation with sod replacement. A true fiscal conservative would address the priorities of the majority by allocating these funds to the addition of a restroom at the pavilion, which, if you haven't noticed, is in desperate need of renovation. This restroom would not only serve the economical ADA and environmental enhancement of this facility, while serving the needs of the community gardens as well as the entire west side of Brook Run Park. Now that's what I call a win-win situation. Personally, I'm tired of attempting to explain why porta potties, usually a temporary measure, continue to be an eyesore with questionable sanitation limitations and in no way ADA accessible. While reviewing the proposal for the new park at Georgetown Renaissance, I noticed the addition of 2 new restrooms with 1 more to come. Where is the balance? I firmly request you vote no.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you.
What a tangled web.
Next name up is Martin Wintermantle. Name and address in 3 minutes, Mr. Winter.
Hello again. Martin Wintermantle, 1723 North Springs Drive, Dunwoody. I'm a resident, a taxpayer, and a voter, so I'm credentialed. In June of 2011, and I'm speaking in this instance in support of maintaining the dog park as is. In June of 2011, Council adopted the park as part of the Parks and Recreational Master Plan. It included relocation of the dog park, and it also included, subsequently, funding for the project, which was approved October 29th of 2012 through Council's adoption of the budget at that time. In the end, there never was an independent vote specifically focused on the dog park. It was simply a component of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, much like the federal government's way of doing business. In the future, you might consider exercising a line item veto. Nonetheless, each of you have effectively voted to relocate the dog park, particularly Mayor Davis. Once the dog park issue came front and center, it generated constructive and creditable public input, as well as validated independent third-party studies. And it spoke to the flawed rationale supporting relocation of the dog park, namely soil and compaction and tree loss, as master plan as their justification. Given that all that has transpired over the past 2 years, and since reconsideration is not an option, how can council correct this mistake and not spend $200,000 more of taxpayers' dollars needlessly? Easy. Simply direct staff not to proceed. Choose not to approve the first item in the new business on the agenda for this evening, which is the proposed contract letting to relocate the dog park. Have the resolve to speak to the issue specifically and not hide behind the flawed Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next name up is Barbara Pryor. Again, name and address in 3 minutes, Ms. Pryor.
Thank you, Dr. Bonser, for all of your work for us, our community, for all these years. Thank you very much. Barbara Pryor, 4735 Cambridge Drive, Dunwoody. Over budget projects up for approval. Phase 2 multi-use trail, budgeted $441,000. After paying for design and hydrology, there is a balance of $413,000. The bid and contingency recommended by Hutmacher and staff is $666,600, more than $250,000 over budget, or more than 50%. In addition, why is the cost of Phase 2 so high in comparison with Phase 1? When there are no bridges, Phase 1 has 3, much reduced grading, Phase 1 has a section 50+ feet wide by several hundred feet long, cut out of the earth, and fewer trees to be removed. It is proposed that the responsibility of the needed funds will be kicked down the road by taking $253,600 for funds for Phase 3. It appears the contractor, Triscapes, has not built a multi-use trail. New dog park location, $195,000 was budgeted, but the bid and contingency recommended by Hutmacher and staff is $281,583. That is $86,583 over budget, close to 50%. In addition, how much is budgeted for constant remediation and maintenance to prevent duplicating the current dog park issues, including early sod replacement? 5-acre park, $1,025,000 budgeted, just for grading, parking, and multi-use trail, just those things. If compared with the current construction at the 16 acres, perhaps another $1.5 million will be added. That is over budget, probably close to 50%. In addition, at the public meeting to gain citizen input, numerous people asked to move the amphitheater to Brook Run Park due to safety, noise, and parking issues. The staff simply renamed the amphitheater, calling it a smaller band shell / pavilion, leaving the design in place. Brook Run Park security cameras, originally budgeted at $113,000. Iron Sky quote was $135,750, and council approved. Now staff says the contract did not include installation of new conduit and electrical wiring, so need another $74,267 for a total of $210,017. That is $97,017 over budget, close to 86%. In addition, why invest in this project, which is not monitored, instead of a siren that would alert citizens of an impending tornado? In 3 of the 4 above projects, $437,200 was over budgeted, and perhaps another $1.5 million for the 5-acre park amenities, for a total of close to $2 million over budget. Thank you, Ms. Pryor. You speak of those people in red.
Thank you.
Looks like you two are also in the red.
Next name up is Frank Lockridge. Name, address, and 3 minutes, Mr. Lockridge.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm wearing red tonight, not in support of the issue that came up, but because of the handiwork of a Sandy Springs dermatologist. In a few minutes, you're going to vote on a very important issue. And it's an important issue not just to me and the citizens of Lakeview Oaks, but to all the citizens of Dunwoody. You're charged with the care and protection of the assets of our city and for enhancing the living environment of all of the citizens of Dunwoody. Brook One is one of the largest assets that we have. It certainly contributes to a positive living environment. The location of the dog park within Brook Run is an extremely critical decision that rests in your hands. I have written you a position paper stating the opinion of Lakeview Oaks. I've also stated to the Brook Run Dog Park Association leadership, the Dunwoody Homeowners Association, and provided written copies to each of you our disapproval of the Dog Park Association's plan to remain in its present location. You inherited the present location, a location based on the whim of the then county CEO, without getting any. He did that without getting any input from any adjoining neighborhood. Based on input from your staff, a park design consultant for the master plan, a dog park design consultant, a very well-known arborist, neighbors' complaints, and your own personal visits, to the park where you witnessed the damage and the obvious inappropriate location, you decided to move the dog park to another location. I urge you to stand behind your decision. Leaving the dog park where it is poor stewardship of a valuable asset and will result to damage to a possible destruction of really the last urban forest in our city. You're going to endanger property downstream from the streams that flow through Brook Run to flooding because of erosion and increased runoff resulting from the changing surface of the dog park area from vegetative to hard, compacted, impervious clay. You're going to continue the noise nuisance on Lakeview Oaks and our neighbors. Contamination of West Nancy Creek will be increased by the soil particles that are carried into the creek due to the erosion and the increased runoff. You're going to limit the use of the urban forest to a selected few citizens and not all the citizens of Dunwoody. It does not provide ADA access to the dog park. And you're going to create, well, you will have something unique. You'll create the only all-shade dog park in the country, if not the world. Do the right thing. Show good management and committed leadership to protecting and improving Dunwoody. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all we have for public comment. Let's move on to the approval of the meeting agenda for tonight.
It's not anywhere.
Evening, Mayor and Council. It started with the approval of the update on the concept plan for Project Wins on Spot Acre Park. As you can see in your monitors and up on the board, we've taken into account all the considerations that we could from the public and from council comments in our last meeting and attempted to try to address all those in a new concept design for y'all tonight. Some of the highlights you'll see based on discussion of the playground being too large, too many amenities for younger children. We tried to dial that back a little bit by minimizing the footprint for the playground area, making that a smaller playground facility. We introduced another fountain space, which would be more of an interactive fountain space. It's ornamental, but also interactive, Centennial Park style. We've also removed the multi-sports court and put in one full and two half-court basketball courts that are specifically for that activity based on comments that the multi-sports court just wasn't fitting with what activities council wanted to see in this area. We also tried to show some dimensions on the park. Sometimes it's hard to see the scale of some of this stuff, how big or small it is when you start looking at parks master plans, because this park could very well be 30 acres and all of this stuff fit into it. So we tried to show some of the distances. You'll see the terraces are 12 foot wide, so they're wide enough for picnicking and families to sit along the terraces. We also tried to show the dimensions of the field space to kind of give you a scale of how small these areas are. We're not looking at Aaron's amphitheater style seating or anything like that. It's more of a quaint area. It can be used for multiple purposes. The majority of the time we think this area will be used for passive play. There is an opportunity for if there was to be a small cultural event or the middle school wanted to use it for a school choir activity or something like that, it would be a decent size for something like that. But we're not looking to do any major large concerts or anything like that in the space. We also added some additional pavilion structures. What we tried to do with only 5 acres, we're trying to make the space as flexible as possible for a variety of age groups to be able to use. The programming of those pavilions could be a variety of things. I think I got most of it. We did also, based on Councilman Short's concern about the noise, to the new neighborhood being built, we did add additional vegetation buffer on that edge, just to try to beef that up, much like we did in the master planning process. And one thing we also showed too was the additional parking all the way around office facility to the south. I think that brings up our parking count to around 160 some odd spaces. So there's ample parking here for whatever activity we decide to do. With that, I'll turn it over to Ray and Eric are here from Kimley Horn, and they can answer any additional questions you have. And of course, I'll be here also. Thank you.
Brent did an excellent job of covering the programmatic changes. Just in terms of the layout and space layout, to accommodate those programmatic changes, basically the biggest change to the open areas is that what was previously labeled the amphitheater has been scaled down slightly, and the picnic area has moved into that to cut it down further. And to add the basketball courts, the playfield to the east side has been reduced just very slightly. But otherwise, all of the changes were made roughly within the same footprint of the meadow on the front side, the active play area in the middle, and then the open field for multi-purpose use on the back side. Just a few minimal changes. Otherwise, the layout's fairly similar, and there's not a whole lot more to add, so we'll be happy to answer your questions.
All right, so I have a couple of questions, and one is probably for Brent or Warren or some combination about the funding. The money that's being allocated, is it to pay for the playground equipment or the basketball courts, the 1 point whatever million?
Yeah, in the to answer your question, Councilwoman, in the fiscal year 14 budget, we put a partial allocation toward the overall cost of the plan to be funded and started construction. So the idea is to do construction in 2 phases, one in fiscal year 14 and one in fiscal year 15. So fiscal year 14, what we're anticipating being able to do with the money that's budgeted, which I think is $1,025,000, is to do the grading for the site, the parking areas, the multi-use trail. We think those funds should cover the costs for those activities, grassing the other areas, and then come back in either supplemental fiscal year 14 or in fiscal year 15 and complete the construction of the park by putting in the amenities, the courts, the playgrounds, and the other finishes with the landscaping. So basically just doing it in 2 phases. One would be sort of the basic infrastructure, and then the amenities would come in the following year.
Okay, so based on what we've spent, do you have any idea for the amenities as planned on this design? I know we get in trouble because we just a ballpark of what the basketball courts in particular, that's really my only priority. What would the basketball courts cost? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, you got a better idea of that?
Anywhere from 50 to 100,000
each?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Depends on surfacing of materials and base coat.
All right. So I have spoken before about my concerns about where we're investing park dollars and in what volume. And the trail is the connectivity, not necessarily the width of the trail, but I'd like to have the connectivity from Georgetown back through Brook Run. But I don't necessarily think that, given the needs in other quadrants of the city, that this is necessarily a great use of city resources at this time. Saying that, what I'd really like to see from this, the more I think about it, is as much as I want my splash pad, I don't want it here. I know I said that last time. I don't think we need a playground here. There's a playground on either end. If the families want to walk, it's a nice stroll. But if all they want to do is go to a playground, they don't need to take the stroll. Does that make sense? That's my perspective. I don't know if anybody else shares it. If there's no playground, there doesn't need to be a splash pad in particular. I'd like to see the basketball courts, obviously. And I'd rather almost see open space than picnic shelters. The pavilion or something next to the basketball court would be nice for the people waiting to play basketball, to have somewhere to sit. But to me, I'd like to see this as at least mostly active use. That's just my perspective. Because I get the idea that you're going to walk from one playground to another, and I think that's all kind of charming. But I think if we only have this much resources, then how we spend them is more critical. The more I have thought about this plan, the more what I would like to see here is sort of unstructured active space. And I really want my splash pad, but the more I think about it, I just don't think we ought to put a playground there. I think we ought to have, the families that want playgrounds can walk along the path if they feel the need to go to 2 different playgrounds. And one day they have the potential to take a nice stroll on our connected path. And so that's just my take on it. I'm also concerned about the overall cost of the project. Like I said, we're spending an awful lot of money in just one section of our city. And so, but I'll let other people share what they think.
I agree with some of Lynn's comments. I was looking at the park plan and trying to figure out, after talking to some residents who attended the meeting that I missed, why do we have 3 playgrounds in a row? I couldn't understand that aspect of it, and the conversations that the residents discussed with me at the meeting, they said that there was really a need for adult activities. There's a sport called pickle. It's sort of a cross between tennis. It's basically a type of tennis game. What activities could we be providing if we're not putting the playgrounds there that we are not offering anywhere else? Could this be a park that is between the other 2 that could be a destination for special activities with an open field, but also have activities, active recreation for those of a different age range that aren't served by Brook Run or the Georgetown plan? I agree with the connectivity. I like larger pavilions instead of smaller pavilions. I love the basketball courts. They need to stay. As far as the amphitheater or the, what is it called now? The
Small band shell.
Small band shell. Again, I wasn't at the meeting, but much of what I was told was that was a large discussion item, and yet we still have it. I'm concerned sometimes that meetings are held and we're not given all the information from all the people who attend all the meetings. I had to find out about the meeting and the pickle and some of the other comments from the residents that were there. I don't get to see anything other than what's in the packet, and the packet doesn't include some of those items. So I have a hard time with these meetings where I don't think I'm getting all the information, so it's difficult. The band shell, as much as it's a good idea for the hillside, I'd much rather have that band shell over in Brook Run where I think it's more appropriate to have it. I'm fine with open space. I'll defer to other people. But again, I think it needs to be more programmed for an older age range.
And I echo a lot of those same comments. When I look at the pavilion area, again, my thought is have the open field there for play. I think when we put the picnic shelters there, it closes that area down. And, great for concerts. I'm not sure great for active play. And I kind of look at 7 picnic shelters as being overkill. I still just don't picture our citizens going there to picnic. Again, 1 or 2 may be fine. I think when we get to 7, we're getting into overkill. I echo John and Lynn's comments about the playgrounds. Again, love playgrounds, but just keep in mind we're redoing Linwood Hollow. We've got a great one there at Brook Run, and we put a brand new one that's not even open yet over at the PVC farm. And I was going to back on the splash pad, but now that
it needs to go from there.
Yeah.
We don't need
and I think if we could reconfigure that to get a larger space for soccer practice, lacrosse practice, those sorts of things, even if it's not regulation, even if it's not an organized league, I think we'll get better use out of it from an age group of, teens and active 20s and maybe even older folks that are active that are highly neglected in all of our parks right now. So that's kind of my thoughts on it, and quite frankly, I'd like to see another design concept before we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
You don't have to.
I know, because I'm not going to have the opportunity to vote on this, but I still want the splash pad.
Okay. Well,
it doesn't have to be here, but I
right.
hope we at least put
Right.
it in the front of Brook Run
Right.
I just really think kids
Right.
really enjoy it, and I've been
Right, I know.
cheering for one since
I know.
2011, we were working on
Right.
our Parks Master Plan. I think
Right.
it would be a big hit.
Right.
Yeah, I think my number one concern is the overall cost. Warren, can you tell me what the 2015 budget would look like to finish this off? I know I saw those figures in there, but without
Yeah, we did not include a cost estimate on the totality of the project for what we need to add in 2015 into the memo. So I think we need to get back with you on what we believe. But again, from a concept plan standpoint, it's not engineered. I'd be hesitant to give you a number that all of a sudden will be relied upon as the budget for the project, when that's not really what we're doing at this point. Is just allocating some funds as available. We don't know the total cost of it. I think it would be reasonable to assume that that $1,025,000 is at least half of the total cost, and probably be another 50% on that to put the amenities in. But until we get to engineering and design, and construction design phase.
Yeah, I think, we do have playgrounds right there. I'm gonna buy a Lynn and Adrian a little pool.
A sprinkler. A
I'll
sprinkler.
I'll put the hose coming up to the bottom so they go up. I think, it's nice. The noise reduction over there by the residential areas, is that what they're gonna do? Is that gonna?
Yeah, what we've done is doubled the vegetative buffer on that side from the play field. The challenge that you have on that is that, and this is just as policy choice of council, but we feel like that there is, that's a good size field to be able to put lacrosse practice or multiple soccer games on at the size that it is, and that buffer should be sufficient enough to provide certainly visual and sound buffer from the neighborhoods that would be developed on the side of this. Clearly the residents, this park's going to go in before the houses, so folks buying it will know exactly what they're buying going in. They'll have a chance to decide based on facts whether or not they want to purchase those homes. I think the fact that it's close to a park, it will be a selling point, less than the distraction from the price. So I think we put in as much as we can without starting to take away from the size of the play field that's there.
And just let me make one comment on that. Again, keep in mind that the park's going to be built first, and then the neighborhood comes in second. There's some people that want to buy a house on a park and want to be able to see the park. I mean, it's kind of like you buy a house on the golf course, not to be buffered from the golf course because you want to see it. Some people, again, and I know I hang with a different crowd, want to have a house on a multi-use trail. They don't want to be buffered from it. They want to be on it. If I were to buy a house in this, I would buy right where that P is, but I would only buy it if you didn't buffer me from the park or from the multi-use trail. So again, it bothers me that we're spending taxpayer money. You see that? Yeah, put my house right there. It bothers me that we spend taxpayer money to buffer apart from a neighborhood when some of the neighbors may actually want to be on that park. I think that may be a decision better left to Wheeling than to us. But I'm not passionate about it. Just keep in mind that there's people that actually want to live on a park where they can actually see the park.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just one comment, and I'm hesitant to inject myself in the conversation, but just want to make one simple point on the playgrounds. I have heard the same feedback that y'all have heard, is that it doesn't make any common sense to put 3 playgrounds anywhere near each other along the trail, because if you want to go to a playground, you just go to the playground. But I think there's a segment of the community that has children and grandchildren, and then sometimes those children are of multiple ages, where you have a teenage son or daughter, and then you've got a 7 or an 8-year-old, and the teenager can go off and play on their own, but you've got to supervise the other child. And then also, the playground is not a passive use, especially for my kids, but it certainly is part of active recreation as opposed to passive recreation. So I think there's some advantage to having it as a small element. If y'all want to shrink it some more, I think that may be appropriate. But I would keep some element of that to be able to engage multiple audiences in the park at one time. But that's just, it's a policy choice against.
Let me go ahead. Share, and then I'll get off the stage here. I didn't never heard of pickleball until the night of that meeting, John.
Okay.
And apparently it's a game for old timers, and I must have, that's my memory's gone bad. I'm sure I should have heard about it by now, but it's quite a popular sport. But I don't know too much about it, but it's kind of played with a big ball, and it's kind of played like tennis. That's what I've been told.
I've seen it.
I think the pavilion, I like the size of the pavilion. Let's say if we're gonna have picnics, all that stuff, I think we should have a nice sized pavilion so that people can have a family picnic. Whatever you wanna call it, the place with the band shelter and all that there, I don't think Dunwoody's big enough to have two of those. And I think a more likely place would be in Brook Run Park personally. And just build one nice one, and I don't think we need two band shelters. I think we really need to take a look at the budget and set a budget that we can afford, and then build to the budget.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things we need to do. Basketball courts are fine. I like the picnic area. I hope a lot of people will come. The other area over there is open for folks to kick the ball around, do whatever they want, lacrosse, that's fine. But I'd like to find another use for the band shelter, and I'd like to see what the possibility is. I know what it costs to put in a pickleball court. Basketball. I don't know what it is. So, but I'd like to at least investigate the possibility of that, because that's for senior citizens, and we have senior citizens living all over. And with that, I'll start back.
I think the bigger problem we have here tonight is that we don't have priorities.
Right.
I talked a year ago about the need for a Parks and Recreation Commission because we are here tonight trying to decide what is an unmet priority of the community. And that's what we haven't really decided. What is the unmet priority of the parks? So when we go to put something in here, we can design all kinds of things, but a more basic question is, what is the unmet priority here in Dunwoody? I would argue that fields would be an unmet priority for play. Basketball courts are an unmet priority. But that's really what we ought to be addressing with any project, but especially with this one. This doesn't appear in our parks plan, so we haven't had the full master planning process. We've had some, the public meeting and designers and all, but that's really what we're about here is what is the unmet priority? And it's not clear to me that we're solving an unmet priority, because I don't know what that unmet priority is beyond the fields and the basketball court. I'm glad to see the splash pad coming out. As much as I appreciate your comments, Lynn and Adrian.
It's temporary.
But splash pads and water features are prone to be maintenance hogs. I've said that and said that for 2 years. We even have a water feature now at Brook Run that works far less than when it doesn't work.
We will build it better.
So at any rate, what I would do, and I also would hope that whatever design we end up with, because I think the message is we're not happy with this one right now, is that when we go to construct it, that we do it incrementally over time. We don't have to build the entire set of amenities with the very first pass. Right. That we can do this and say, this is where we would like this to be over 10 or 15 years, because that's what we're doing with other parks. That's what we're doing at Brook Run. We're doing things incrementally, pay-as-you-go basis. But we need to have a plan to do that with. Off the cuff, I think if we, when we take the splash pad out, if we take the band shell out, we can move one of the playgrounds back, maybe even to where the splash pad is, and that opens up a pretty big area in there for yet another field on the, looking at it on the left side. I do like the terrace seating in the hillside that's there, because it could be spectators just there to sit and enjoy or to watch whoever might be out there on the field. And because, while you're there, it may be cost effective to do that. But anyway, it just seems to me fields and basketball courts, I like the pavilion with the bathroom. I think you could even have picnic shelters around the edge so that you're not interfering with the fields on both sides. But that would be my sense. But I would hope that we would reconsider a Parks and Recreation Commission, because we're all over the board here. We just don't have a sense of unmet priorities.
Hold on a second. It seems that we need to put this back on the shelf and look at it again. How about if we defer this?
Right. Yeah.
Bring back to it, with those comments, bring back what
Right, yeah.
you think may be a design consistent with that.
Yes, I just would like to see, of course, I'm not going to be here, but I would like to see, what the results were of the last meeting. I think that would be helpful. My other question is, the one thing that did stand out to me was the playground for 6 to 12-year-olds. Where else do we have playground equipment for 6 to 12-year-olds?
We're grinding in Georgetown Park. They're aged 2 to 5 and then 5 to 12 by structure. That's how they're built.
Okay, because I've been over there and they didn't appear to be for older kids.
Well, 12 is 10, 11, 12, it's kind of.
They're built that way based on body shape. A lot of science that goes into it, but they're built for the size of an average 12-year-old. That's why they age it to 12.
I think we are in agreement. We have enough toddler or the younger kid amenities, but probably not enough for the older kids, I think is what I was hearing the council saying.
And just so I can throw an option out there at you, because of the expansion of trail systems around the nation stuff, there's a lot of new play activity components that are built along multi-use trails. And so it's more, there's the exercise equipment for adults and things like that, but there's also like some new lines of products where as you're on a trail, you can hop off with your child and have a small structure to play on. It's not necessarily a destination type playground area, but it is something for kids to play on as they're on a trail or in the park. And a lot of some of you may have seen like the boulders and things like that older kids can play on too. So that might be an option for you, where if you don't want your typical playground facility, where we could install some play structures along the trail throughout this park, where people, if they're on their way from one to the other, if your kid gets tired, we could put it in resting areas. They could stop, take a break, play for a little bit, and then move on. So that's just another option. And if you want us to bring that to you, some visuals of what that could look like, we can bring that to you also.
Yeah, I think that'd be okay. What I would think is bring us back some options and then say, here's the area, here's some things we can add. Bocce ball or pickle court, 50,000. That's what it would cost. Basketball courts cost this, that pavilion cost that, the playground would cost this, and we saved all that money because the Lynn's splash pad moved over to our house. A few of those items there that we can piecemeal the cost down, and then I think we need to have a group sit down and kind of hash this out a bit and go from there. But I move we defer this.
We have to do a motion?
No.
No, I don't think if we just do
Want to
nothing.
do a
it
motion to defer, just defer.
Yeah, just move on.
Just move on.
Move on.
All right, let's move on.
Is the contract award for invitation to bid 1309 multi-use trail phase 2. As was stated in November, we let the contract bid for construction of the trail. The bids came in November, or after the November meeting date. So I wanted to come back with the award. Triscapes was our lowest bidder, and I've attached the bid tabulations on the very last sheet on here, so you can see their low bid. Came in at right under $606,000. What we've done is put together a budgeting package for you where we have allocated the $441,000 towards this project. There was some design fees, so the standing construction budget was $413,000. Then we've also shown you an option for funding the project through allocating funds that are in the 2014 budget for Phase 3A to continue funding of our multi-trail system throughout the city. Fiscal year 13, I'm sorry. So you can see the breakdown in your packet. Basically, there's $413,000 allocated currently. We have additional funds in the budget for 3A that can be allocated towards this project of $253,600 to make up the difference between the budget that was allocated in 2012 for this phase to complete the Trail of Denver project. I will look up the questions from that.
This is for Warren, because Michael Smith isn't here. Is that right?
I believe he's upstairs. Yes, I can handle him.
Just out of curiosity, how much does it cost the city to repave 1 lane mile? Or if somebody were just to build a street from scratch, 1 lane mile, how much would that normally cost?
I'm gonna have to defer that question for Michael.
Because I would be curious, I know the city has a set or agreed upon price that we pay per lane miles as far as asphalt paving. But when you just want to know if you could mill down a road, do all the work to fix the bed or whatever, and then repave it.
Yeah.
How much does that cost? Because this is costing 600. What was it? 666,600.
Yeah, I can, I'll get with Michael and be able to kind of give you a ballpark estimate of what it costs to pay per road mile versus the construction of the trail.
I know we're not paying $666,600 per.
No, and I don't think they're really apples to apples comparison, but it's certainly a policy choice on how you all spend the funds.
But it gives us an idea, and this number just, it doesn't make any sense to me, or just, I agree with.
Well, I think the one thing that if y'all take a look at in the spreadsheet, and we did some analysis of Phase 1 and Phase 2 to give y'all a little bit of an idea, and the distance and the cost, including the design and the contingency and construction. For Phase 1, the average cost per mile is $655,714. For Phase 2, the average cost per mile is $655,283. So really, this is a longer stretch. That's why it's more money than the first phase. But the average cost per mile, I mean, without, the numbers were the numbers. It just averaged out to almost exactly the same amount of cost for Phase 1 and Phase 2 per mile.
It's a quarter of a mile longer. That's it. We're talking about a quarter of a mile.
Yeah, what we did is we averaged it out per mile, so that if both were a mile, they would cost the same exact amount.
I'm very concerned about this, and I know I'm not going to have the opportunity to vote on it, but we were told that there were not going to be any bridges on this section. It was strictly paving. There was going to be less grading needed, and there were going to be fewer trees removed. And so, and also, I don't think that I don't know about the water issues. Is there going to be as much of a stormwater issue, because we've done half the south side of the lower part of the.
There is some significant improvements being made into the stormwater system that would be able to handle some of the issues from Phase 1 will be contained within Phase 2. So in other words, if you look at Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the trail together, the overall net is no impact for the stormwater. That's because we're able to control some of the water on this phase.
Can we take some of those costs out so that the council can see this is how much we're paying for the actual building of the rest of this trail, and what we're doing in remedial work? How much is that costing us to fix the erosion problems we're having in Phase 1? I think that would be helpful to the community.
First, let me just go on the record. We're not having erosion problems on Phase 1. I just want to make sure for the public that.
But you said that we're fixing.
We're taking the water capacity and being able to contain more of the water than we have on Phase 1, but we don't have any environmental problems caused by Phase 1. but we're able to take from a hydrological, I'm going to get out of my lead real fast here, but from a hydrology standpoint, when you do a post and a pre and post comparison, and then you look at what the water differences are, when you take phase 1 and phase 2 all together, we're able to take all of the water from pre to post and be able to control it with the improvements to phase 2. And I can try to get you a breakdown of some of the controls, but I'm not sure how exact we can get as to exactly how much money is for this purpose and that purpose, because some of it's just based on the grading and the flow of the design of the trail. I think the other thing to consider too is that in phase 2, we're dealing with a slightly different construction economy than we were in phase 1. We were finding the hungriest contractors when we started phase 1. So the price of concrete's gone up. I think in this bid compared to the first one, it was 30% cost for construction materials. So we're seeing a more difficult construction economy from the standpoint of that there's more work for them, and we're starting to see our costs increase on all of our projects compared to what we were paying sort of bargain basement prices in 2008 to 2012.
Are you going to be fixing the area around Bridge? I know you said you're not fixing anything, but Bridge 3 definitely has some issues.
Yeah, and then Bridge 3 is exactly where we start for phase 2. So the design sort of continues that, and then they'll remediate issues from there.
So, in the interest of disclosure, I'm voting against this because I didn't think it needed to be 12 feet. And which brings me to the point. If this was a project I was doing at my house and it came up essentially 25% more than what I had thought it was going to cost, I'd have to make some changes. And so, and I probably wouldn't be able to kick it down the road. And so I'm wondering at what risk we're putting our future councils, because to me the issue isn't the width of the path. I mean, it is, we have to have a path that's 8 feet, but that it gets to where we need it to go, which is the connectivity part. That's the part of this project that I value the most.
Sure.
And so I would hate for us to spend $250,000 or whatever it was. My agenda turns itself off, sorry. 253, $250,000 that we were going to spend on the next phase, which to me is equally as important. And frankly, this phase stays in Brook Run, right? So it's making the loop. And so the question is do we need to revisit the scope of this project? And obviously that's a policy decision for the council, or something to get it. Again, it comes back to what Terry said, is that we're sort of spending sort of blindly. If we have this pot of money, for me, the connectivity is a bigger priority than the width of the path. But that obviously may not be for everybody. And
yeah, I think you bring up a couple of points. Let me try to address them best I can. From a width standpoint, we did look at this, and that basically what it comes down to, and you do the analysis of the cost of the concrete versus the overall cost of the project, it's about $15,000 a foot from a width standpoint. So in other words, for the entirety of the 1.06 miles. So if you reduce this from 12 feet to 10 feet, you save $30,000 total. If you reduce it from 12 feet to 8 feet, you reduce $60,000. So it's only about 10% of the cost.
So total project.
for the total project? Not, okay.
For the total project.
Not linear wood.
We looked at that. Obviously there's some other additional concerns if you decided to reduce the width of the path based on what we've already constructed, what we have in our agreement with DNR for the width, and then also the future phases that are under construction. But we looked at that because we figured the question would come up during this meeting, and the cost savings are not significant in that would change the scope of the project. I think the challenge on this is that the scope of the project is not sort of a Cadillac of how can we run this in an expensive way. This is pretty bare bones from the standpoint of how you get from point A back looping over to point B. So I don't know if I've addressed any of your questions, but I'm certainly I understand.
Let me run one other possibility, but I think it's probably not possible. But let me ask. So it's not the Cadillac, but the reality is that if someone wanted to hop on the trail and go to Georgetown Shopping Center or to the Renaissance Parks, they could still do that without looping Brook Run.
Correct.
And so, but is under our obligation with DNR, this is our plan, right? I'm not totally suggesting we should postpone that part of the phase to keep going to the rest of it, but I'm just wondering, if that's even a possibility, and I probably don't have any support. But do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a few ways that you reduce if the overall objective for the council is to reduce the cost of the project. The width issue doesn't really get you a lot of money, and then also you'd have to redesign, so you lose your savings based on the redesign and hydrology costs. From a distance standpoint, I think part of this is to be able to provide, the trail systems to provide, pedestrian and connectivity, but it's also a recreational trail. So I think part of it is that, folks can go in and do a good run or do a good bike ride based on the additional distance. So I think that loop is important to be able to give us some length, because the length of the phase 3 connection is going to be very short. And then there's obviously some good distance, 19 and 16 acres. But I think the loop adds to the point where you can go in and do a 5K on this track. So I think there is an advantage to doing that. From a cost standpoint, let me also just sort of address the elephant in the room is, that we've gotten some of the feedback is, holy cow, we're over budget. And I think that's a little bit of a misnomer in the fact that there is a certain allocation that was put in to the budget for this project. The allocation was done 3 years ago. We came up with a cost estimate based on the master plan, which was all of the projects for the entirety of the city. And that's how we ended up with basically a placeholder within the budget. So I don't think that we stood up at that time and said this absolutely will cost $400 and something thousand, and that's all it's going to cost, so we're going to build it to that cost. We put in the money that was in the master plan at that point. We went through the concept plan. We did that publicly. We shared that with the council. We came back. We showed you exactly this is going to be the route, it's going to be the width, this is what it's going to look like. When you go out to the bid process, that's when you really find out what the costs of the project are. So I think it may be a little bit of semantics, but I think that it was never sort of a solemn promise that we're going to make sure this costs $440,000. I think our cost per mile is consistent. I think, we certainly bid this out and got a considerable number of bids. So I think the policy choice from the council standpoint, I think you got a few choices to make changes. One is to phase it, which really is not going to be very cost efficient. Having the contractor come out in 2 different phases, it's still going to cost you the same amount of money in total. It's just a matter of how much you spend per year on the project. Reducing the width, we've already talked about, doesn't make a ton of sense. It doesn't save you a lot of money, and also you're going to lose that in the redesign. Changing the route is really the only way to reduce the cost to get to some particular number. And as I said before, I don't know that at any point that we had a firm expectation that is all we're going to spend on phase 2 of the trail. We did put a placeholder in place to have some money allocated, similar to what we did with Dunwoody Village Parkway. Dunwoody Village Parkway ended up coming less. This one we came a little bit more. So I think those are the policy choices for the council. It's never fun to add to what you've allocated for the budget, but sort of the project is what it is at this point, unless y'all want to change the overall route, which is really to reduce the amount of mileage on the trail would be the only way to get the cost down to that number. And that's a sort of a long-term decision based on a short-term issue.
Doug? Yeah, and here's my thoughts. Obviously, I'm disappointed that the bids came in higher than we had allocated budget. But those were the costs. I mean, we had a lot of bidders on that, and a lot of them were in the... I look at phase 3 as not needing to be done until we've got phase 4 done, which we wouldn't start until late 14 anyway. More realistically, it's going to be 15. So I see phase 2 as a much higher priority than going straight to phase 3. Phase 5's done, phase 1's done. If we do phase 2, it completes the loop in Brook Run and is a standalone amenity in and of itself. I think we'll see a lot of use from the walkers. You got a 2-mile loop that's out there. I like staff's recommendation of taking some of the money that we had allocated for phase 3 and putting it here yeah, that may mean that phase 3 gets put off for another budget cycle, whether that's, you know, extra host funds or into 15. But I don't think realistically that's going to be when, or I think realistically 15 phase 4 getting put in anyway. So I think we ought to move forward on it, even though I'm disappointed with the numbers. They are what they are. And if we put it off, the numbers aren't getting cheaper. You know, we can put it off and cuss and complain, but, you know, bottom line is that's what it's going to cost. And it's, if we defer it for a year, it's not going down, it's only going up.
I think in phase 3, don't we have some deadlines on the property that we have easements on there as far as completion dates?
Yeah, we've got a 2-year window on the temporary part of the construction easements. So, and I think, you know, the idea here is to, and let me kind of explain the 3A, 3B issue, because I think this is an evolving project, and the facts and circumstances are changing. What we did, we took some excess host money from fiscal year 13, 363, and put it toward phase 3A of the project. We'd split phase 3, which is basically the connection point between the end of phase 1 and the 19-acre park. And it goes through 2 properties, Columns at Lake Ridge Apartments, and it goes to the Peachford Hospital site. City acquired the easement property rights for the Peachford site, which is the longer of the 2. Distance-wise, but they're both pretty short distances to be able to connect the 19-acre property to the phase 1 trail. At the time that we acquired those rights when they were available to us, and then we were pursuing property rights for phase 3B, which is the Columns at Lake Ridge. At that point, we did not have an agreement in place. We still do not have an agreement in place for those property rights, but we're a lot closer to being able to acquire the phase 3B rights at this point than we were when we constructed the budget for the amended budget for fiscal year 13. So I think what would make some sense, and some efficiency as well, is to do the full design for all of phase 3 instead. So in other words, cancel 3A and 3B and make it one larger phase 3. So if we do the design together and the construction together, it'll be less impactful. We'll be able to finish that part of the trail a lot faster, and I think that's reasonable. So I do believe we can still complete all that we need to complete within that 2-year time frame. All this does is change, in other words, we put some money in the savings toward phase 3, so we won't have to refill that bucket when we go to construction for phase 3. There's still design funds to be able to design that whole segment, and the benefit of that also is that once we complete that design, we'll be able to give you a good hard construction number based on those estimates before we go out to bid, and then fund that based on real design numbers instead of placeholders from 3 years ago.
Okay. You know, that's kind of just kicking the can down the street a little bit. You know, to stay in budget, you know, and you're looking at a place, I'm looking here, where can you know, end the trail where it'll be on something where you could get all the way around anyway, and that's Barclay right there. I see where it actually goes right alongside Barclay, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't it? Right there.
Yeah, what we did is we instead of putting in the sidewalk along Barclay, we're going to run the trail along Barclay.
It's already in there,
part of the
correct?
sidewalk.
Isn't that
A small segment is already in there, but this connects the rest of Barclay. As you can see, there's a huge gap right now between the sidewalk work we did near the fire station and the work that we did closer to North Peachtree.
Well, what I'm wondering here, what I'm getting at is, I'm wondering if you take the money allocated and you build the trail to where you can, and I think you could be right up there at Barclay or somewhere. And then the next year, you know, budget and go from there. But I don't, you know, we're going over budget this year by that much. It's quite an extensive amount. I would prefer to stay more in budget, you know, end the trail up there in Barclay where you can go around anyway. And, you know, I just figured out a ratio, and basically you can about a 0.8 miles for what, you know, what we have budgeted. It's 0.77 if you want to cut it right down. So I'd like to know if that's got any traction up here at the council at all, if we would consider taking it up that far, and then, you know, budgeting out the next year. You know, this is something that doesn't have to actually be done this year, or next year, well, next year now, 2014. And yes, costs may go up, they also may go down. I don't know. But that's just an idea I'd like to float out there, the possibility of shortening the trail and using the allocation of the $441,000, I think it is, which includes $100,000 grant.
Mike? Denny, I appreciate the thought of shortening it and getting it within budget. That makes sense until you start thinking about Barclay. Barclay is the road, the curved road that goes behind Peachtree Middle. It is completely tree lined. There are no sidewalks whatsoever. It's filled right now with leaf litter, probably 5 feet wide, and right now it's almost a single lane road. Cars come around that curve and fire trucks come around that curve, and if you're expecting to have children or basically anybody use the trail in total, they're putting their lives at stake to go on Barclay. I understand where you're coming from. I just think it's a bad place to cut out the trail. If there were sidewalks there, great, but no, that's way too dangerous to walk on Barclay.
Hey, John, let me reiterate. I'm talking about Barclay, going up to Barclay where this, all the way to where it is now, a 12-foot trail right now.
I think what he's, if I may, Councilman, I think what he's suggesting is that you take the route up to the corner of Barclay and North Peachtree, and then leave it there, to have that being the terminating point, as opposed to looping back to connect in so that you could run more than one lap on the trail.
So you're thinking of taking off the North Peachtree Road aspect of it then? I mean, you're going to do the trail all the way up to Barclay and North Peachtree Road.
You know where that 12-foot wide is? It runs up to North
that is.
Peachtree now and goes back down there. Run it up to that part and connect to that, and then, you know, that would be probably somewhere in the neighborhood as I'm looking. I'm just, you know, I don't have a rule or anything go here, but that's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 0.75, 0.8 miles.
There is a sidewalk there right now for North Peachtree Road to Barclay, going all the way down North Peachtree Road, and you could do the loop to that aspect. That sidewalk is right on the street. The sidewalk's not in the best of shape, but again, we knew that the trail was going to be taking most of the traffic on that. It's not a bad suggestion.
Well, what I'm looking at there is, I'm not on half the time on the moment, that's supposed to be. I'll put this light out here where I can see it. But anyway, I thought that way we would have a trail all the way out to North Peachtree. We'd go up North Peachtree and go back in and go back around again if they'd like. But, you know, and we'd stay within the budgeted amount for this year. I'm just looking for a win-win on the budget.
Actually, I like the idea. The front of the park right there on North Peachtree Road is slated for tennis courts and other amenities, and that'll all need to be added at some point in the coming years. I see no reason. Splash pad, there you go. I see no reason not to. If you make that motion, sir, I will second it. I think it's a good compromise. It completes 80% of the trail, and again, the rest of it is sort of there already to a certain extent.
Let me just pipe in on this one a little bit. I think that you know, this is the sure sign that the economy is coming back, because the last piece we got was considerably cheaper. Considering the bridges, I still look at this as coming in a lot more expensive, and the bidder that bid last time didn't come back this time because he's got so much other work. This was too small for him. With that in mind, I think that the compromise may not be a bad solution. You're basically taking it out to North Peachtree, then you're coming in the driveway, and then connecting back behind the skate park. Do you guys run the numbers on that and see if that would work?
I mean, certainly we can run the numbers on deleting those sections. I think the question I would have for the council, though, is the intent to fund that remaining section in a later budget, or is the idea to cut the total cost of the trail to get to this particular number? Because my guess the.
Let me answer that.
If you finish it, it's still gonna cost you the same amount
Yeah, and
as
that's
what we're
my-
suggesting now. You're not
won't spend
saving
as
any
much.
money by doing that. You just,
We just make ourselves feel
Do
better.
it
We've
in
got money
phases.
budgeted for 13,
But you're not
We've got money budgeted for 14.
Well, we need to go out with a new RFP. Well, we need to go out with a new RFP, or would that work under this?
I'm not sure. I think I can make an argument that you just ask the current contractor to make a deletion, but that's a significant enough change that some of the other folks that bid on it might have an issue with it, so I don't know.
We can't really, getting started on this in this, this environment and this time of the year is not a good time to get started anyway, but, I don't know, I'm looking for a compromise here, and I see that as a compromise. No, we will eventually do the whole thing, but, to go that far over, almost, basically, 30% over.
But keep in mind, Denny, we're gonna spend it at some point. It's gonna get done if we're committed to doing it. And it's kind of like we're just prolonging the pain, if you will. And if we're gonna get it done, we may as
What
well
I'm
start
looking at
knocking
is that, you've got so much funds to spend on this. And I think you spend so much this year, and so much next year, and you go down the line of what you've got budgeted.
And that's my point, is we've got money budgeted for 13, and we've got money budgeted for 14, enough to do it and have money left over for design of phase 3.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, Brent just pointed out to me that, as we took a look at this after the bids came back and looked at the value engineering sections, it appears that the Barclay section, and then the connection back around where the athletic fields will be in the plan as you go parallel to North Beach Street and then back to the section. It looks like those two, if you cut it out on the value engineering standpoint, is about $84,000 for that section. So that's how much you'd be cutting out from a cost standpoint. It wouldn't be the entirety of the 250. It'd still probably be about 170. And it's not perfect engineering. That's what we've done from the value engineering standpoint, is the Barclay section and then the playground section to be able to get back and around. So I would just go ahead and add 20 grand to that just to be safe, but it's probably about 100,000. And again, it's not a scenario where you can take every, quarter mile section and they have the same price, and you just cut out a few quarter mile sections, you get down to a certain number. So that may not make actuarial sense, but when we asked the contractor to look at certain sections, if we were able to phase it or take it out, that's where the numbers kind of come up on a rough basis.
Can I ask you, can you put this map up and show me exactly where you're talking about?
Yep.
Denny and John, where this point is? I think I know, but
Have you got this,
I think I know what you're talking about, and that'll be the basis of what I say next.
We're gonna run it up on the document camera. I think I can point out what we're talking about.
While that's coming up, I'm trying to visualize it where I think it is. And this is really to Lynn's point, part of this is about connect walk on Peachtree and to do, hear what Denny is saying and what John's talked about. It seems like we would still have the connectivity that we're after here.
Yeah, well, we're talking about here in the compromise, if you can look at the section, so Barclay Road, as y'all are familiar, comes up, and then what you're talking about is ending at North Peachtree and Barclay, and then there's another section that takes you to South Georgia Way, which is the main road, which has I believe a 5-foot sidewalk already between that section, and then taking you around the loop to be able to get back to the starting point of phase 1.
So for somebody using the trail and they come up Barclay, this trail, which really dovetails with the sidewalk would end, in other words, where it makes that left off of Barkley, that's where it would end, is that right?
I believe that's what Councilman Shore was suggesting.
That's it, Joey, right there. And that trail right there, I don't know how far that is, Brent, do you know it's already 12 feet wide?
Yes, just that small section of sidewalk is 6 feet. Then it's, I think, a 5-footer along North Peachtree.
So for user of this trail that wants to end up, they park where the trail now starts, they want to end up, they can still accomplish that. Can they do that in a safe mode? Is that sidewalk safe? Can they?
I think the challenges on it would be that you got a 5-foot sidewalk versus a 12-foot sidewalk. You've got that sidewalk that we're proposing, the trail that we're proposing runs significantly into the park, so you're not on North Peachtree competing with traffic. Although you're on a sidewalk, you're not competing with traffic, but you're right on the main road.
No buffer.
And then we've got in the construction plans some crosswalk safety to be able to, there's no current safe way to cross South Georgia Way, which is the main entrance to the park. So we have built in, I believe, it's a raised crosswalk to be able to safely get across access. And then we've got the same width rolling around the side of the playground to be able to connect back into where phase 1 is. So I think that overall, one of the policy questions council just needs to ask is, if the plan is to end it at Barclay and North Peachtree, but eventually complete the loop as planned, all you're doing at that point really is taking from fiscal year 14 or 15, fiscal year 15, which hasn't been budgeted for yet, where the funds are currently available in fiscal year 15 amended, which y'all have already approved for the trail that we're not going to be building in 14. So I think there's some semantics here. I don't know that it's an overall cost savings. I think it's just a matter of you can get down to a certain number this year and still add back that same dollar amount later on a smaller project that may be more expensive because you're asking a contractor to come in and just complete that small part of that loop. So I think temporarily, there is some paved connection, but I think there's a significant difference between sort of what's being proposed and going on a 5-foot sidewalk and then no crosswalk to be able to get back over to the other side of the park to that phase. So is it doable? Absolutely. It's just a policy choice of how council wants to approach it.
I guess where I was going with that was that section might be viewed more as a nice finishing touch, whereas up until that point, it would be more of it's more than a finishing touch, all right, because the trail's not a trail. But up there, because we're very close to a sidewalk, we're still providing connectivity. It may not be the 12-foot connectivity, but it's still connectivity that's there. And it sounds like that would get us closer to budget. And it may not be that we would finish that next year or the year after or whatever. It may fall lower, going back to my unmet priorities, it may fall lower in the priority list because the connectivity through the sidewalk there on North Peachtree would already exist, and the road in South Georgia Way. That's all I was getting at.
I understand.
Can I make a suggestion, Mr. Mayor? Can I suggest that we go to, I don't know if you have to do a complete new microphone. It was for a while. May I suggest that we go to the bidders, if you will, and talk about, what that distance is there, and putting that, I don't know the legalities of it. Cecil's sitting right there, money's right here, so we got all kinds of lawyers. Ben's sitting over here. So what that cost factor would be to run it up to there, and then we've got the loop. My intention is not to forget the rest of it, but when you're talking about a little phase here, you can combine that into part of 3A and 3B down here, whichever you want to run, and you would have the same amount. But I'm talking about leveling out the budgeted amount over a longer period of time, rather than going over the budget this year by that amount.
And Denny, when would you put this in the budget? Because again, I think we're just playing a shell game of we're taking out this budget and putting it in next year, that in this year. But we got to spend this money. If we're going to complete the trail, we've got a bid, we've got a contract, we've got the low bidder. I'm just not seeing why we're playing the shell game.
I'm not playing the shell game. It's just like at your house. You know, if you've got so many dollars to buy a Ford, you know, you come in and they say, "Gosh Almighty, you know, the nice Ford you got costs this much." I can't afford that, so I buy a Ford with not quite as much of equipment. You know, and that's all I'm doing. I'm just staying in the yearly budget to try to keep it moving down the track.
So what you're suggesting, is to phase it and just be able to spend only what we have budgeted, particularly for this section this year, and then pay the rest of it in the next year.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay. So it would not. So in other words, it would still be the same total cost. It's just spreading it out over 2 fiscal years as opposed to
Staying
one.
within the annual budget.
And then
staying within an annual budget.
Okay. Because I think one other suggestion, and again, you know, it's just a matter of semantics in some ways, but what we're suggesting within the memo is to take the 363 that y'all have already said you want to spend on the trail system and put that money toward the toward this phase, so you can do this whole phase at one time. Because again, if we're still going to be spending the whole amount, then it really is just a matter of which fiscal year the money comes out of, because you've got the money budgeted this year for this trail as constructed. It's just a matter of you've allocated some toward future phase 3, which now is delayed because we think we can get the land acquisition versus keeping that money in there without using it, and still being able to use it toward fiscal year toward phase 3. I don't think I'm real clear at this point, but what I guess I'm getting at is that I think really the policy choice is if the intent is to do the entirety of the trail, splitting it between fiscal years really isn't going to save any money. And I think you already have the money available, the 363 that you've already appropriated, so you can move forward with that. And then knowing that you're still going to have to add money based on what you were saying before, you're just adding it in 15 instead of adding it in 14.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
All right, any more discussion?
Yeah, you get to that vote on.
That's where we are right now?
This is approval of.
Well, I had a question.
All right, we're in the question section.
Who was proposing, was there a proposal, one of you guys suggested, of running the trail along North Peachtree?
I think what they were proposing is just using the existing sidewalk network. And I don't want to speak for Councilman Shore, but what I think he was suggesting is that use that sidewalk network and then in a future fiscal year, go ahead and improve it based on the plans that are on the pictures.
So we would have part of the trail along North Peachtree?
It would,
be
on a temporary basis, use the existing sidewalk along North Peachtree.
Yeah, I just don't agree with that, only because this is supposed to be a trail in a park. And so people will walk on this trail because they want that park experience too, the multi-purpose trail experience with the trees. So Barclay is kind of tree lined. North Peachtree, you're going to be right in the traffic, and so you're missing part of the purpose of having a multi-purpose trail in the park.
We have a motion to go ahead with the plan as presented by the staff. I tend to be with Doug now. I think that I'd rather see this finished and get done with this instead of never getting to the final piece. So any more discussion? Are we ready to vote? All right, the motion is to approve it as presented by the staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, 4-3. All right, it passed. You got that, Sharon?
About the city's website redesign. As we stated the first time we came up to you, that this is an incredibly important tool to connect with citizens and to create a vast improvement from where we are in our overall communications with residents, with people trying to do business with the city. Create a website. Our goal is to create a website that is easy to use and, of course, easy to navigate for visitors. One that is supporting the latest technologies, connecting with mobile devices, as well as integrating video and social media tools. Again, we present to you that after our review of the firms that have submitted proposals, we come back again to say that Jesse James Creative, in our overall review of all the firms, is the strongest candidate and the team that will create we feel, the most effective website for our needs, with the highest quality and the best functionality and the greatest ease of use. You asked us a couple of questions to come back to you with from our last meeting. We had the opportunity to conduct some follow-up with Jesse James Creative, and was able to confirm that there would be some future integration opportunities with Sire, which is the platform that we're working with now, and also expanding the indexing and document search functionality. They said they would be able to do that within what they have seen from what Sire is doing. There is the compatibility question with Silverlight media player software, and that they said that they have experience with some of the issues that they have seen with Silverlight, and that they said that they would be able to present a workaround, if you will, for lack of a technical term. I'm sure Ashley could come up with a better technical term, but that there could be some workability with Silverlight going forward. We also contacted the references that they provided, and they gave us very positive feedback on the business relationship as well as the capabilities of the firm and their overall design and support. And then you also had requested a look at some of the costs, from the initial cost to an estimated annual cost, which we've provided as well in the table there. And with that, I think I've summarized everything that you had asked us for. Any questions or anything that you'd like to discuss here?
Yeah, last month, when we talked about the reason for going with a higher bid, we didn't have the annual cost then. But I thought a statement was made that Jesse James had lower annual costs because they weren't charging license fees and things like that. And yet, when I would see the annual cost, that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. Did I misunderstand that last month?
No, actually you didn't. What we ended up doing was we went back from the first year cost that we have. There's the way that Jesse James does their support isn't on an as-ad-need basis. All the other firms charge you a flat rate whether you use them or not. So what we did to apples to apple comparison, we put in the first year of what we budgeted for the annual cost, and we carried it over to year 2. We will probably not use that, so the annual cost you see will more than likely be less than that. If you were to take what we did as far as a safety measure in there, they would come in at $4,200 a year, which would be less than all the other ones. That was just budgeting for staff having a learning curve or whatever might happen from the first and second year. The first year cost that's reflected, the $7,200 is what we're paying, having 30 hours of support in for the year, carried it over to year 2. So that $7,200 is with that 30 hours of support in there.
Okay, and the other providers, those are true annual costs ongoing?
Yes, however, there's one thing to mention, that in their proposals, they did put a caveat that hosting costs can go up each year. Each of the providers after year 3 increased their total hosting costs by 5%, at least by one of them. Jesse James is the only firm that allows us to host